All right, guys. So today we're talking about rod bearings, and as all you know, BMW has having issues with rod bearings. Most new cars that come out, new engines that come out now from 2011 and up have rod bearing issues, and a lot of them pre 2011 have rod bearing issues. So this includes N55, N63, S63. Boy, oh boy. N20 could have rod bearing issues. On and on and on. And as you know, most of the M cars have rod bearing issues. Even S54, S85, S65, S62, and the E39 M5. Why is that? Well, hard telling. I think they finally are going to make good on N55 rod bearing stuff, but it has to be within a certain mileage. We're seeing stuff for sale right now with 70,000 miles, the engine's blowing up. And just as a perfect example, let me set this thing on something. As a perfect example, my friend Kevin just called 2 days ago. He says, "Hey, I found this 335i 2011. So that's N55 car, late 2011. And I'm pretty sure it's N55, almost certain. Anyhow, it was knocking. And I told him, I said, well, here's the situation. They wanted $3,000 for the car. The car looked okay. It had right at 100,000 miles on it. Anyhow, back to what I was saying, somebody pulled up. So N55 car, engines are crazy expensive for those right now. Crazy expensive. I told him, I said, look, around 100,000 miles, if the body's good shape, if the inside's good shape, we're looking $4,000 or $5,000 car, kind of max, and not an easy car to sell either. I mean, everybody's skittish to those cars. They have injector problems, they have turbo problems. 100,000 miles, it's going to need valve cover, it's going to need electric water pump, associated hoses with that. The control arm's got to be about shot. It's probably going to need tires and brakes because they all do. And you'll see most BMWs for sale right at 100,000 miles or 120,000 miles. That's usually when they get the big bill and they don't want to fix it. However, after quickly looking at their YouTube and seeing a lot of people having rod bearings that were all the way down to brass, 70, 80,000 miles, like totally shot. I don't know. Once the car is knocking, there's no putting bearings in it and on your merry way. Once it's knocking, the crankshaft either has to be replaced or you got to pull it out and you have to have it turned to the machine shop. Now, once it's knocking, depends on how bad it's knocking, it could have also ruined a rod. It could have beat up the rod. You have to have it checked. So right there, the engine has to come out, has to come apart. Therefore, you need timing tools to put it back together. You need head gasket. You need all associated oil pan gasket, everything like that. You run into a lot of money. Let's say if you buy that, if it was an N55 car, it should be the cheapest engine I could find was $3,400 for that. So right there, pay $3,400 for it. You're already $6,500 in it. That was kind of like best case for engine. A lot of them are $5,000. Best case, you're already close to $7,000. Time you actually change engine, you do the maintenance on it, you're going to be in $8,000-9,000 if you do all the work yourself. And it's already not worth it. If you got to pay a shop to do it, that's way not worth it. You literally have to get the car for nearly free. Even if you got it for almost free, would you come out ahead on it? Probably not. That's bad to say, but that's where you're at with a lot of stuff. And, it also goes back to, you could buy an F30 for basically the same price. You could buy an N20 F30 for $5,000 right now. And that's where it makes it difficult. And we all know E90 has a lot of junction box problems, have a lot of FRM module problems. They're kind of the most plagued car with module issues. And we see that all over. I see that every day in this business. E60, on the other hand, as long as you pull the drains out of the ECU box, generally you don't have a lot of problem with E60. And a lot of you are going to scoff at that, but that's the truth about it. So interesting. In the same way with S63, uh, N63, all that stuff, the engines are crazy expensive because they're in high demand. Now, there were some crankshafts on eBay, some used crankshafts. Talk about risky for $1,000. And boy, I tell you what, a used crankshaft, you can't just put it in. Has to go to the machine shop and be Magnaflux to have everything checked on it, because if it's ever had any kind of rod bearing problem, you may not be able to physically see much wrong with it, but it might have hairline fractures if it's been banging on itself. The next question is going to be, can you change over to ACL bearings? Can you put the APR rod bolts in that? Yes, you can. And you could buy that way cheaper for these cars than M5. M5 is 10 cylinders, right? So you got a lot more stuff. Looked like the ACL bearings and everything was about $220 for the rod bolts, the bearings, and the whole works. Let's say all associated. Let's say you bought one early on. It wasn't knocking yet. At this point in time, it had to be 60, 70,000 miles. But if it's not knocking, you're going to have to pay full retail for it, right? Whether it's N55, S63, pretty much all that stuff commands the same amount of money, within reason. So let's say you bought one that's not knocking. Let's say you bought an F10. F10's even cheaper yet, right? An F10 535i, 2012, 2013 model. It's not knocking, so you're going to have to pay retail for it if there's no current problems with it. You're going to go ahead and pay, like in my area, probably $6,000 for one of those, $7,000. 70, 80,000 miles, you might pay more for it. You might have to pay closer to $10,000 for it. Before you could consciously drive that car or do anything with that car, I would be afraid to drive around the block before I did rod bearings in it. It's such a common issue. We have to pull it back here. You gotta pay what the car is worth to start with, just to gauge it out for you. Pull it back here, put on the lift. We'll spend a day taking it apart, a day doing the rod bearings, cleaning up all the gasket stuff, cleaning up the oil pan, putting the oil pan back on, and the next day reassembling the subframe. So yeah, 3 days worth of work in it. Time you bought the gaskets, you'd have to do water pump. You put $1,000 in that car in a heartbeat, right? Then you're already $1,000 over what the car is even worth. Then you have a good car, right? Then you're gonna drive it around forever. No, you're not. You're not. You're gonna drive it around until you have an ejector problem, or you have the cluster problem, or some kind of major failure. And on E-System, it's not as easy to find somebody to clone things for you and do things for you on that system. Then like I said before, you have all your suspension problems. Has the transmission been serviced? More than likely, nothing's been done to the car. People here do not fix cars. They drive it till it just won't move and sell it at 100K, right? We've seen that with the M5, with everything else. So that's kind of the situation. I still stand firm. You guys are going to laugh at me. The S85 and the M5 so far has been their most reliable engine after the maintenance is done on it. If you have a shop and are able to do the rod bearings yourself on one of those, once you're done, you're done. It's been good. We've had some little problems with mine, little fiddly problems, but that's all stuff we're sorting out that the previous person didn't do, right? So that's my thoughts on the rod bearing issue. What is the cause in closing here? Engines make a lot of power. I have a 4-cylinder, I have a 6-cylinder, probably a little too much, and things don't last. Could it be a rod bearing quality issue? Well, we're never going to know that, probably. It very well could be. Hard telling. It's going to be it, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you later. Have a good day.